Hello everyone, my name is Connor Stark. I am a student at Arizona State University and I am currently working on my master's degree in family and human development. So the topic of my presentation today that I'll be talking to you guys about is youth gang involvement, specifically youth gang involvement and prevention. So I'm very excited to share these ideas with you, to share the research that I've been doing, and I'm very blessed to be doing that today with you guys. So let's dive right into it and share these ideas. So I wanted to start off by giving you guys an overview of what I'll be talking about throughout my entire presentation. But first things first, I wanted to talk about my main goal, which is to reach after school program partners like ICANN, Boys and Girls Clubs, and other local prevention centers. So I'll start off by talking about the scope of the problem. So this will be concrete facts, numbers, and statistics to give you guys an idea of the real problem at hand, the real issues that are occurring with youth gang involvement. After that, I'll go on to talk about the youth gang effects. This can be both at the micro and macro levels, so I'll dive into that later in the presentation as well. After that, I'll talk about the causes of gang involvement, specifically risk factors that may make youth more likely to join a gang. I will then talk about current approaches, so what needs to be changed or how these solutions that are already being implemented may need to be improved to better reach the target group of youth. And then also, I'll critique the research a little bit and give you guys my concrete solution to help reduce the severity of the problem, because the whole goal is to impact youth in a positive way. So, moving forward, what seems to just be the problem? Well, as I started to research more about gangs and gang involvement, I was more interested in the youth side of things. And what I found was that there are already high rates and growing numbers of, and this was with youth gang involvement. So researchers like Howell, O'Brien, Daffer, Chu, and Thomas have found that it's actually been a problem for decades within the United States. But then on top of that, there has been an increase in numbers recorded over the years as well. So that kind of tells us that it is a problem that's been sitting within the United States, but then not only that, it has also been growing and mutating, and that the problem has been amplified a bit. So it is safe to say that something needs to be done about it to improve youth prevention and keeping kids away from these very malicious activities. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the problem, just how bad the problem really is, and I wanted to do this through the use of some concrete numbers, facts, and statistics. So in overpopulated, overinflated continents, more gangs are being discovered. This was found by Pyrus and Decker. Not only that, but in 1998, 780,000 youth were a part of the nearly 29,000 gangs across the United States, and that was indicated by the U.S. Department of Justice. And jumping forward a few years to 2010, nearly 1 million adolescents, 1 million, were noted as being affiliated with gangs in one way or another. So that was by Pyrus and Sweeten. And not only that, but the year after that, in 2011, 20% of all middle and high school students just reported youth gang involvement as a problem within their school settings. So that just kind of paints a picture in your guys' heads of how bad this problem really is. We jumped forward, we talked about numbers steadily growing and it being a persisting problem within the United States. So these facts, statistics, and numbers definitely do confirm that idea that it really is a problem that needs to be addressed. And so now I just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about the effects that youth gang membership can have on the individual. Specifically, I wanted to talk about the effects on a micro scale, so on a micro level, the consequences that can come about. So just a few of these individual consequences, Pyrus and Sweeten did note that there are many negative health effects associated with being affiliated with a gang, especially at the youth age. So this can be in the form of injury, drugs, other crime-related activities, whatever the case may be, bad mental health. The point being that there are too many to count and that there are very real consequences for these youth. Augustine, Thornberry, and Crone, three researchers in 2014, also note that becoming a parent during the teenage years is a very real possibility. So that can definitely be a very stressful situation for youth if they do become a parent and feel like they have other responsibilities and other stresses in their life. Not only that, but high school can leave unfinished. They can leave high school unfinished and not get that diploma that they may need for more success later down the road, which really can hurt them and is a very real risk. And not only that, but even living with significant others as teens is a very real consequence as well. So cohabitation, not living with their own parents under their own roof and household, that's a very real possibility as well. And this can lead to very negative consequences down the road for them. And like I said, this is just a few of the individual consequences that could come about. There are many others. And even Fisher, Gardner, Montgomery in 2008 found that cognitive deficits, and this was in their study. So moral of the story, the youth gang effects are very real, and this is just the micro level side of things. And so now that I've gone through talking a little bit about the effects at the micro scale, I wanted to talk about the youth gang effects, but specifically at the macro level. So researchers like O'Brien, Daffern, Chu, and Thomas have noted that youth gangs were reported as being problematic, but more specifically around different global regions. So we find that it's not just places like the US, it's not just high-risk communities, it's all over the world. And we're finding that delinquency, disruptive behavior, and malicious activities are taking place to affect local communities negatively, but this is just all around the globe. So that was a very astonishing finding to realize that youth gang membership isn't just one problem that's been persisting and sitting around in the United States, it's all over the world. And moreover, and more importantly, negative patterns of maltreatment can take place. So Hennigan, Kolnick, Bindel, and Maxon uh, make this point in their research that patterns of thinking and bad treatment towards these children in gangs can take place because society can begin to have a very negative view of them. And if we do have this very negative view and don't take positive measures to really impact them, it can make them feel even worse. And then we have more youth that may not be getting the help that they need, and we might not be really making a true and profound impact on them. And we really may not be trying to fix them, the issue and problem at all. So I wanted to give a very concrete example of youth gang effects at the macro level and how gangs are affecting local communities and also different global regions. So it was actually found that in Latin America, a researcher struck in 2006 found that there has been a monumental increase in violent behaviors over 20 years. But what was more interesting about his finding wasn't that there was just this increase in violent behaviors and malicious activities and gang involvement. It was that it was specifically attributed to youth involvement with gangs. So that led to this kind of new question in my head: is crime correlated? Is much of the crime that goes on correlated to youth gang involvement? And so you can never really make assumptions with these kind of correlations, but we do see that youth are impacting different societies, and that was what struck me as very important in his research, is that youth are having a negative impact, that it is important to intervene early, and it goes back to all, again, the big picture that we do need to intervene early with these youth because they are impacting themselves negatively and impacting these communities negatively and even different global regions across the world. So now I wanted to go on to talk about the possible causes and or risk factors that may make youth more likely to join a gang. So Yoder, Whitbeck, and Hoyt, three researchers back in 2003, found that there is an overlap between the homeless youth, so those that are low income, low SES, and underprivileged, and those youth that are involved with gangs. So those that are not as privileged as others and maybe living in poor environments, those youth are more likely to join a gang, and that was indicated by Yoder, Whitbeck, and Hoyt. So the probability of the risk increases. And Klein and Maxon in 2006 also found that a lack of parental supervision and monitoring is a very great risk factor for youth. And that makes sense as well, because if youth don't have a solid parental figure in their life to watch over them and make sure that they aren't doing these very bad and negative things, then they will be more likely to seek comfort and seek guidance in other communities and other places like gangs. So they will be more likely to seek that gang membership. But the main idea I just want to kind of point out is that some populations are at risk over others, and that was noted by these researchers. So it is important to keep in mind that there's never really one single cause, but these are just a few of the main ones that may make youth for more likely to join a gang. And again, I just wanted to point out and say that it is important to keep in mind risk is a very tricky business. There is never one single factor. Like I said, it is not black and white. It's not easy to pinpoint causes, and there are always multiple factors involved. And even the researchers Aileen and Wood in 2010 state that there are psychological influences, community influences, and individual influences as well. So whether that's having different communities that may be influencing the youth. You could have psychological factors. Maybe they have a lower self esteem or have risks going on inside of them. And then, even individually, they may be making choices to pick out negative environments and making very bad choices. Whatever the case may be, there are, it is not black and white, but some people do have more risk over others, and some are less susceptible to joining the gang. So, at the end of the day, in considering these various domains, a better understanding of the overall risk for a population can be assessed, and causes can begin to be identified as long as we keep in mind that it is a culmination of risk factors, and all these different risk factors do add up to give us a better picture of who is at risk and who is not. So we've covered what the problem is, what some effects may be, and also even what the causes can possibly be and what the risk factors can be for youth joining gangs. And now I wanted to dive into the current approaches to prevention. Well, what we do find from the researchers is there are programs out there for youth. Hennigan, Kolnick, Vindel, and Maxon make that very clear in their research that there are prevention facilities. They are available, they're easily accessible, and that many neighborhoods have them. And even Vigil in 1999 stated that school efforts started to take action to actually prevent youth gang membership. So we see that there are current approaches out there and are programs available for our youth. And so, like I said, there are various organizations and various prevention centers that are looking to make a difference and are taking affirmative action. This can be places like Boys and Girls Clubs of America all across the nation. And the point is that there are prevention centers, like I said before in the slide. They are available, they are accessible, but I'll begin to talk about in my next slide how these approaches can be improved, how they can make an even more forceful impact on our youth of today. And so now I'll move on to the actual approaches and what really may be wrong with these approaches and how they can be improved. Well, for starters, the research found that these prevention centers weren't reaching the target groups, and those who were most at risk were not receiving help. And so this was a really astonishing finding because Lipsy, even in 2009, found that a failure to register kids with the most risk into the programs was what led to the program failure. So it wasn't really just that prevention centers aren't available or that they're not accessible, and past research showed that kids are or do have access to them, and that they are placed in local neighborhoods and areas where they may need help. But Esmond said Osgood, Peterson, and Taylor and Carson also said that there was a failure to capture those most at risk. So that kind of shows us that there may be a problem in the way that we are assessing risk and the way we are looking at risk and really trying to incorporate risk assessment into our organizations. And so this was interesting for me because I wanted to find a more concrete solution and really answer this question. Well, if we aren't reaching the target group that we need, then what do we need to do within our prevention centers and organizational facilities? And so now I want to get into a little bit about my solution. Well, after careful research and critiquing and analysis of all these current approaches, I found that, like I said, risk assessment was the main problem when it came to these organizations. And it was the enrollment process and enrolling those who are most at risk into the organization, that was the problem. And so that led me to think, well, how can we actually fix that problem, that real problem of not getting that target group, those kids that are most at risk? And what I found is that an assessment like the GREF, which is the gang risk of entry factors, can really make a difference because it can be as simple as 17 questions, high risk assessment, incorporating questions like low SES or lack of parental supervision and monitoring. These were the kind of questions that Hennigan, Kolnick, Vandella, Maxon composed to create a high risk assessment. And by implementing this into an organization like a Boys and Girls Club, or in the context of any preventive organization, you can really begin to identify those who are most at risk. And you can do the distribution of this assessment throughout high risk neighborhoods, and organizations can give it to various people and start to begin to enroll those who are most at risk, because we do want these organizations to make an impact. But at the same time, they cannot make that impact if they are just enrolling kids that maybe don't need the help or who may not even be at risk at all. And so I just wanted to re-emphasize this idea of identifying those most at risk. We need to reach those who need the most help. We need to reach those kids who are most at risk. We need to make a difference and make an impact on them and be preventive and really assess the greatest risk for them and get those kids into the organizations. So, as the research has shown, programs and prevention centers are available all over the nation, but it will do absolutely nothing if the target groups that are most at risk are not being reached. A downward spiral for our youth is what lies ahead if we don't reach these youth. We talked a little bit in the beginning about those negative consequences that may come about, whether it's risk for injury or being involved with drugs or being involved with other malicious activities, whatever the case may be. These are the consequences that lie ahead of them if they are not reached. And so I believe through hard effort and implementation of a high risk assessment like the GREF, a better future can be created for these children, and that they can really be impacted in a positive and very forceful way. And to just give you guys some visuals, I wanted to include some pictures and really get this idea through your head that these children are headed down a very dangerous and very risky path if they do not get the help that they need. So the prevention centers like the Boys and Girls Clubs and like the gang-free programs that are preached all around the communities, they aren't really going to do much if they are just going by chance and guessing at which kids may be more at risk. You have to really take the time to sit there and assess the risk and really get those children who are at risk and who do need the most help into those organizations. And I do believe if we do that, that we can truly make a real and profound impact on these youth. And so lastly, I just wanted to talk a little bit for a few minutes about my fieldwork site that I'm currently doing my internship at and my fieldwork at. So I'm currently at ICANN Positive Program for Youth, and I wanted to talk about my fieldwork site because it takes my ideas that I put forth in this presentation and it actually implements them to an extent. Not necessarily the GREF, they don't really use the GREF in their organization, but they do utilize high risk assessment. So they use a community needs based assessment to measure which families and which children may need the help that they deserve. And so they really trying to enroll children into that organization based on who is most at risk. And that's what I really like about this organization, because that's the idea that I've been researching this entire time. And so it is a prevention center that reaches the target group. It does seek to strengthen and build youth character, and it has been effective for many youth and families within that organization. And so they do aim to have the children there at least 2 to 3 times a week. I'm currently there 2 to 3 times a week as well. And so it's such a blessing to actually be at this organization and get to see my ideas at play and see them being worked out between children and the staff, and getting to see how these children are being impacted in a positive way, but specifically those who are most at risk. And so if there's anything I want you guys to take away from my presentation today, it's that we can begin to impact youth in a positive way and stop youth gang membership and prevent them from joining these gangs, but we have to reach them first. And so I just want to leave you guys on that note and really challenge everyone today to realize that it's not always the giant steps, it's about the little steps. We have prevention centers, we have facilities, we have programs, but at the end of the day, we need to reach those children who need the help they deserve. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for listening.